Welcome back, everybody. So, this was just before this last trip this week and the end of it, which was this morning. All total, maybe about 2.5, 3 hours worth of work. But this is getting the rest of the wing ribs prepped and to a point where I can get them primed so I can get this thing assembled. So, right now, I'm taking the stack of left wing ribs, which thankfully we sorted these out back when we did the right side. I'm making sure that they are all the correct rib in the correct order, and I'm adding a number 1 through 14, going from inboard to outboard on them. Makes it easier to put them back in their correct place later. Now it's time to start prepping the ribs. So they need to be deburred. All of the edges need to be cleaned up on the Scotch-Brite wheel. All of those big lightning holes in the middle also need to be deburred. Pretty much every one of the edges. Any of the holes that are done and final sized are going to get deburred so they can be left alone. Those big straight ribs, the ones that aren't pre-cut with notches, need to be fluted and straightened, which is what you see me doing on that one right now. Checking it with a square, making sure it's square to the webbing. You see me starting with the hand deburr tool, and then I was like, wait a minute, I have a Scotch-Brite wheel for this. So yeah, using the die grinder with the Scotch-Brite wheel, the little one, works really well for that. It does end up wearing a groove in the Scotch-Brite wheel even if you hold it at an angle, but it's a cheap enough wheel, it's worth it. It makes this go much quicker. So these ones that are the interior ribs, they're thinner material and they've got those flanges that are segmented. They are extremely flexible and bendy. I do not see a need to do any fluting on those, as they're not twisted like the straight punched ones. Plus they're so bendy they just push right into position. Anyhow, this is this morning at the end of this trip, and I realize I need to make sure I've got provisions, since this is the left wing, for my pitot tube. I'm going with, as of right now, I'm planning to go with Dynon, and their pitot tube has AOA as well as pitot pressure, so I'm going to have 2 lines going out to the pitot probe. In the leading edge of those ribs there is a tooling hole, and then there's a hole that's provided by Vans for the pitot tube. I am increasing the diameter of the tooling hole to 3/8 of an inch so that I can put a snap bushing in for a 1/4 inch pitot tube. Strangely enough, the Vans provided hole is 1/2 inch, which means I'm going to have a little bit of slop when I put a bushing in there for the other tube, but I think it's going to be alright. Now you can see what the edge prep looks like on the Scotch-Brite wheel. You'll notice I did not add any holes for conduit. My plan on the conduit runs, I want to keep signal and power wires separate for anything related on either the right or left wing. So on the left wing, what that means is I want to have a lightweight corrugated conduit that just has my power wires for things like lights or pitot heat, and then separate from that, if I do a wingtip VOR ILS antenna, I want to make sure that that's running through its own conduit so it's not picking up any interference from the power lines. And on the right wing it'll be the same thing. If I put a magnetometer out in the wingtip, it'll go through a separate conduit than the power wires for the lights. But the way I'm going to run those is clips attached to those big lightning holes you see me cleaning out. So whichever one doesn't have the push-pull tube in it for the ailerons, one will have a conduit for power and one will have a conduit for signal wire. That's the current plan. So now I'm just finishing the rest of those hole preps, doing some more fluting. I learned really quickly you don't need to add a flute in between every hole. Then you end up with the opposite problem. It's just, minimum of what you need to get the rib to straighten out. And I'm just constantly checking it on that straight edge right there. Alright, so now it's time to clean off the workbench and get the spar out so I can start clecoing this stuff together, because I need to final size drill the holes in the nose and tail of the ribs through the spars. There's also, you see them there, holes on the top and bottom of the main spar. Those need to get final drilled now while I can to the rib as well. They're going to eventually get skin on them too, and they'll get final drilled again with them, but I figure this makes it a little easier. And I don't know if you noticed, I attempted to put that rib in upside down, which is comical since I put arrows on each one to show me which way it was up. Helps if I read my own notes. Once I sorted that out, the rest of it worked out really well. This would probably have been infinitely easier if I'd have moved the benches away from the wall, but I chose not to. Here comes the rear spar, same as the front. Get it all clecoed in place. When it's time to rivet this together, I probably will pull those benches out so I've got access to both sides. Anyhow, I'm about to discover a mistake right there. You see me looking at it all funny. I don't know if you remember from my rear spar video, but I said it's important. Some of those holes get rivets right now and some don't. And I added 2 rivets someplace I shouldn't have, because that rib has to go there. So I've got 2 rivets I need to drill out. Not a huge deal, but took the center punch, marked the top of the head, and drilled through the head of the rivet. And now I'm just slowing this down for some real time. Best method I found is you drill just through the head of the rivet, provided you get it centered. And then I've got a punch that is the exact same diameter as the hole that I drilled. Stick that in the head of the rivet and wiggle it back and forth, and it pops the head of the rivet right off. And then just take the center punch and use it to start pushing the rivets out of the hole. And then I've got a set of modified side cutters. They're completely flush on one side. You just grab hold of the tail of the rivet, wiggle it a little, and pull straight out. And if you do it well, you don't end up elongating any holes or making bonus holes. Thankfully that went just fine. I'm just taking the deburr, cleaning everything back up, and it's like it never happened. So now I can put clecos in holes that previously had rivets in them. Now for all of this final size drilling, I'm using the number 30 reamer. And right now I'm double checking on the right wing because reamer wouldn't go through a couple of those holes, and then I remembered there are holes that you actually have to drill out. You have to make some extra holes in that wing walk area for those ribs. And that's just because where they line up with the spar bars that are on the back side there. So pop those through, put the reamer back on, and continued reaming out all the holes to number 30. And then move the clecos, do it again. Now I'm sticking the number 40 clecos, those silver ones, in the top, just to line up all of those top and bottom flange marks. Every little bit helps. I probably don't need them there, but since I plan on final size drilling those here in a little bit as well, I figured I might as well. Decide to move the camera over, get you a different angle, so now we're sitting on top of the right wing where the fuel tank attaches. And finishing out the holes, going through and final drilling those number 40s, and there it is, finished and all prepped. Now it has to come back apart. So now that everything's drilled, take all the clecos out, and it'll be a matter of carefully removing everything. Nope, guess I'm not quite done yet. I'm going to finish those bottom number 40 holes first. I am drilling up from the bottom, but I found it's actually pretty easy to just look straight down and I can see right across the drill and tell if I'm straight or not as I pull the reamer up through those holes. Should be good enough. Okay, so now finishing the rear ones. Those are the number 40 ones on the rear spar. My fancy new little right angle drill. There we go, take out all the clecos and take it apart. Once it's all apart, the only thing I have left to do is I'm going to dimple those rear spar holes that I've drilled through last for the skin and the rear spar, because I won't have an opportunity to dimple them later on once this is assembled. Obviously the rest of the holes in the top and bottom flanges of the ribs are going to get dimpled for the skin later, but that's going to be, I can do that as an assembly after I final drill the skins to them. The right wing still needs to have all of that done. So I'm just going to stack them up, deburr those last number 40 holes that I just drilled. I still got to deburr the front and back holes as well, but I wanted to get these deburred because I'm going to dimple them right now. I'll dimple those, I'll dimple the corresponding holes in the rear spar, and then the only thing left for these now is I need to scuff them, clean them, and prime them, which I will probably do sometime later on today. It's already almost 90 degrees out there, so yeah, it's getting a little spicy. But hopefully that means tomorrow I can start putting this together and riveting it together, and maybe even get this thing in the wing stand. Thanks for stopping by. Hope you enjoyed it. I will see you all on the next one.